Walking to work. How are you this morning? Pleasure indeed. I am Mark Smith, and I suspect I know what some of you are thinking. Mark, you're not paralyzed. You guys are quick. Indeed, I'm not paralyzed. But interestingly, I have cerebral palsy, which, even though it's not a paralytic, that is, paralysis condition, we have something in common, specifically the language of Latin. See, my disability is spastic quadriplegia, cerebral palsy. And as some of you may know, quad is Latin for four, and plegia is Latin for weakness in the limbs. So indeed, I have quadriplegia. That's why I snuck in the back door. And in fact, in my registration, what I learned from my 13-year-old daughter is, it's not so much what you say, it's what you don't say that counts. So when I filled out my registration, I conveniently omitted the spastic cerebral palsy part, and this morning, I'm rocking the quadriplegia. So it's a pleasure to be here. It really is interesting, isn't it, how as a culture in North America, as well as within the disability community, we really look at disabilities as condition specific. We have those with cerebral palsy, we have those with spinal cord injury, we have those with Parkinson's, on and on and on. And we all have these type of symposiums among many different conditions, but rarely do we ever get together in a group as one body. And what I've come to realize is it really fragments us politically as far as advocacy and as far as research goes. And the importance of all of us as one whole community, not condition specific, but human specific, becomes utmost to the challenges that we face today. Stem cell research, interestingly, is really a perfect example, because I know that through monitoring the mainstream, when we think about stem cell research, it really is fragmented as far as public knowledge goes and as far as research goes. You know, we are fortunate to have Christopher Reeve champion the cause for spinal cord injury. We've been fortunate to have Michael J. Fox championing the cause of stem cell research for Parkinson's. And it's also likewise been championed in the cerebral palsy community, cancer, etc. But what we see is, again, all these fragmented communities working individually and not as one large group. The subject of stem cell research and its universal importance really hit home to me personally about 11 months ago. See, 4 years ago, my sister, my younger sister, at the age of 23, was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, quite severe. As you can imagine, really devastated our family. Unfortunately, with treatment, she's now been in remission for about 3 years. 11 months ago, we were doubly blessed in that my sister had a daughter, little Danica Ann. And in that process, because my sister was a cancer survivor, she qualified for a grant for cord blood banking. And as some of you are aware, it's really on the forefront of stem cell research. And what I learned in that process is was that through banking my niece's cord, within 2 hours following birth, not only could the stem cells be used to help my niece 15, 20, 30 years from now, but likewise, if my sister's cancer were to return, stem cells could be used in her treatment, and likewise her husband's treatment. So when we take a look at stem cell research as an example, we realize it's not just about spinal cord injury or cerebral palsy or ALS or Parkinson's. It's about over 80 different conditions. And when you think about those 80 different conditions, you realize the impact that coming together as a group on a single subject like stem cell research impacts, again, not just one condition, but the human condition. It really is interesting, again, how we are fragmented as a community and as a culture when it comes to disability. Interestingly, when we look at the mainstream, we see these major lobbying groups, the AARP for seniors, the NAACP for African Americans, the NRA for gun owners. We even have the AAA for car owners. There's all these different groups. But when you look at those of us with disabilities, we truly do not have a united body. We do not have a united front. I want to share with you an interesting statistic. Arguably the largest lobbying body in the United States, second to state tobacco, is the AARP. The AARP currently has about 35 million members. And as we know, very few things get through Congress or the Senate without the AARP voting their voice toward it. They're an extremely powerful lobby, 35 million members strong. Interestingly, there's 49 million people with disabilities in the US. And of those 49 million, according to the census, 2/3 of us are severely disabled. And so when we consider those numbers, the AARP has 35 million members and is really dominating lobbying in Washington. Imagine what we could do as those with disabilities if we came together not based on individual conditions, but based on all of our conditions as humans. It's quite interesting how when we look at the fragmentation within the disability community, we do understandably have a way of internalizing it. As cerebral palsy, I'm not like someone with multiple sclerosis. Someone with multiple sclerosis might not be like someone who has dwarfism. What's intriguing is I go throughout the country traveling, speaking, attending consumer events all over, and I made it a point in my life, in my career, to get involved with as many different disability condition groups as possible. And make no mistake, when I roll into a Little People of America conference, they look at me like, what's this big dude with cerebral palsy doing here? And I have to admit, 2 summers ago, I had the privilege of attending the National Little People of America conference. And one of my lifelong best friends happens to be a little person. And I mentioned to him halfway through, I said, Drewy, I have to admit, as comfortable as I am being around people of all different diversities, I feel like a lot of your peers with dwarfism are staring at me funny. And my buddy was quick to point out that my power wheelchair elevates. And when I elevate it, I sit at about 5'6". I say, he pointed out, Mark, it's not that you have cerebral palsy, it's that you look like the Leaning Tower of Pisa over the rest of the room. Of course, I point out to my friend Drewy, this is my only chance in life to be taller than everyone else, and I wasn't letting that go. But what's very interesting is whenever I attend various events where my disability is different than others, people will also be bold enough to question about why I'm there. Why am I with cerebral palsy attending a muscular dystrophy symposium? Why am I with cerebral palsy attending a Little People of America conference? Why am I with cerebral palsy here today? Disability, again, in the grand scheme, isn't condition specific, it's human specific. When we look at the challenges that I face, when we look at the challenges that many in this room face, many of all disabilities, they're all the same. The example I like to give is when we look at the American with Disabilities Act, it's not condition specific. Curb cuts serve many of us. Braille on elevators serve many of us. And when we look at it that way, it dramatically shifts the paradigm from being about me as an individual, you as an individual, to us as human beings. Another example that I find very poignant is, imagine for a moment that I with cerebral palsy go in for a corporate interview. And on that same day, a gentleman with a spinal cord injury, a quadriplegic injury, goes in on that same day and interviews for the same corporate job. Chances are that human resources person isn't going to go home and tell their spouse, you know, interestingly today, honey, I had a gentleman with spastic cerebral quadriplegia come in, and I also had a spinal cord injury quadriplegic come in. No, that person's going to go home and say to their spouse, honey, you want to hear something weird? I had 2 dudes in wheelchairs come in today. And so really, within the disability community itself, we do a better job at fragmenting ourselves among each other than the public does as a whole. And that becomes such an interesting point because when you take a look at the power, again, at the power that we could have if we all united 49 million strong, it becomes a major political shift, a major paradigm shift, a major socioeconomic shift, where when we take a look at things like stem cell research, when we take a look at aspects like public accommodations, it changes the world where we become a single united voice. Now, whenever I discuss this single united voice, bringing together 49 million people strong, people often say, Mark, isn't that a bit naive? How realistic is it really to take a look at spinal cord injuries and take a look at stem cells? And how realistic is it really to use stem cells to cure all these conditions? In fact, it's remarkably realistic. And in fact, historically, we did it. We did it some 60 years ago with a particular disease that dated back to the Egyptian times. That disease, of course, was polio. See, in 1952, polio was at its all-time peak in the United States. 58,000 people were living with polio in 1952. That number is striking to me because when you think of that number, 58,000, it's not a large number. Currently, today in the US, 11 million people have cancer. That particular number jumps out to me because when we watch the nightly news lately for about the last 3 years, the number one lead story is the jobless rate, unemployment. So when we realize that between 11 and 12 million people currently have cancer, but yet around 13 million are unemployed, it makes me wonder, how come unemployment is on the news every single night? How come unemployment was the number one topic in the midterm elections, but yet we have close to that number living with cancer every day, and it's not on the radar? Very provocative question. 800,000 people currently live with cerebral palsy, and as many of you know, they estimate about 250,000 currently live with a spinal cord injury. So when we look at those numbers alone, compared to 58,000, it really raises an intriguing question. How was it in 1952 that polio, at only 58,000 cases, was such a national priority? We have to go back to 1932 with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He recognized the polio outbreak, and he single-handedly recognized it as a national epidemic, ultimately a pandemic as we know now that it's spread globally. And in 1932, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President of the United States, went on the radio and put out a national radio address requesting that every single person in the United States donate a single dime. And within 4 days, the White House had received over 2.7 million letters containing dimes. Astounding. What happened was the president had made the condition polio a national priority. It was on the national agenda. And so by 1952, while polio was peaking at 58,000, the great race was on, as it was called. You had Salk and Sabin, two scientists competing to come up with the polio vaccine. And in 1956, we had the first Salk, and by 1960, we had Sabin's polio vaccine. So between 1952 and 1960, we literally effectively eradicated the polio virus in the United States. An absolutely amazing feat. And the way we did that was, again, based on the national priority. And so as we sit here this morning, the question is, how has it been approximately 60 years since we've been able to eradicate a major disease? Not just a major disease, but one 3 times at minimum, 100 times more profound than polio was. How can that be? You know, we're going into 2011, 11 million people with cancer, 800,000 cerebral palsy, 250,000 with spinal cord injuries. And we look at stem cell research and realize what a profound opportunity that is. How are we not making that a priority? The answer is, it really lies in everyone in this room. You know, it's been said that revolutions don't occur based on injustice. Revolutions occur based on hope. And that's really what FDR did. FDR gave the nation hope that, look, if we all come together, we can cure polio. And we did. And so as I sit here in front of you today, I look among this room and see the best and the brightest. I see people with hope. I see people with, as FDR might have put it, pockets full of dimes waiting to be distributed to their peers. And so as you leave here today, the message I want to leave you with is, we're not all isolated. We're not fragmented. We're all in this together. And as we go out into the world, I ask each of you to spread the word that we're not looking to cure individual conditions. We're looking to elevate the human condition. Thank you very much.
Visit u2fp.org for more coverage from Working to Walk and the latest in spinal cord injury news.